how do you figure out what you're going to write a book about? Where do you find your story ideas?
I'm hating this.
You don't have to give them to me. I just want to know how you have found them.
No. It's just that it is really the hardest part of my career, is finding an idea, coming up with the next idea. Sufficiently hard that my great friend and publicist, Penny Simon, actually came up with a phrase to describe it, where she says, that's when I'm in the dark country of no ideas. And it is really hard. It usually takes me about a year between the time I finish a book and the time I get a new idea for the next one. And it's hard because all these things have to click. It has to have a narrative arc. Has to be something I'm going to be interested in for a long time. It has to have a really rich underlying trove of archival material, because if you're going to do narrative nonfiction, you've got to have the stuff. You can't go around making it up, although people try. People do make up composite characters, they make up dialogue and all that stuff. So a lot of things have to work. I often think that really it's very much like finding a spouse. It is. You women know this better than maybe the men, but you got to kiss a lot of frogs before eventually one kisses back in a good way. And that's what it's like. It's hard. Usually it comes down to dumb luck, but I like to think of it as structured luck, because I try to put myself, if you will, in the way of luck. I try to read widely, promiscuously. If I'm traveling, I go to museums. I just try to fill my brain with things in the hopes that something will eventually click.
So you are looking for ideas, and then how do you know that you have found one?
Like I said, I'm really hating this. No, actually, you're asking me fantastic questions. How do I know when I've really found one? That cuts into all different levels of neurosis on my part, actually. But a big part of it is I always do a test proposal, a test book proposal. With nonfiction, it's very different than with fiction. If you're writing a novel, you have to have the novel pretty much done. You have to turn that into the editor, and they decide then whether they want it or not. Nonfiction, publishers act more or less like venture capitalists. It's true that you give them a proposal, and if they like the idea, they will fund your research and so forth. That's the advance against royalties. And so I always do a very detailed proposal, even now at this point. My agent says, well, you could just write them a letter now. And I said, well, no, I want to do this proposal because it really tests your sense of the story. It tests whether it's going to work for you. It tests whether you're going to be able to live with it for the next 4 or 5 years. And a book proposal is, an opening chapter, a 10-page or so essay on what the story's about, how you're going to go about it, what's out there, and then you finish with a chapter outline, which is essentially an educated guess. You've done enough research where you try to just sort of figure out where the story's going to go in the chapter outline. And if you get through that whole process and you still like the project, you have a pretty good idea that it's going to work. And then if your agent and your editor say, yeah, we love this, then you have a very good idea that hey, this is something I'm going to be able to live with. But there's also another value to this proposal, and that is it helps keep the terror at bay, because once you get that contract with a publisher, you got to start working on this thing, and it's got to be a book, and it's got to, probably you'll have a deadline. And so the beauty of a book proposal is, as soon as you start working, you've got that outline. You may depart from it a bit, but you've got that outline. You just get started, and that really helps. Also, there's this thing in publishing, especially with nonfiction and with novels, the point where you have turned in what is deemed an acceptable manuscript. An acceptable manuscript. Those are the words you always want to hear from a publisher. And because at any time they can say, I'm sorry, this doesn't live up to what you promised. But if you have a proposal and you followed it, you say, talk to my lawyer, we'll see you in court, that kind of thing.